Commander. We've been hit by one of those space anomalies.
Buddy?
And the piloting system is down.
Buddy?
The astrogator's gears are shot!
Get a hold of yourself. You're an Earth Directorate agent.
Affirmative, Commander. What are the orders?
Brace for impact.
Now I know what some of you are thinking. Why would I bother covering The Outer Worlds 2 when all of us knew this game would be crap? Not only has Obsidian not made a good game in over a decade at this point, but The Outer Worlds 1 was horrendous as far as Bethesda-style RPGs go, no matter how much Redditors try to gaslight you that it was a hidden gem of some kind. Despite playing it for 40 hours, I couldn't tell you the name of a single character except Parvati, and that's for the wrong reason. It had some of the most blatant, amateur, juvenile, capitalism bad messaging I'd ever seen in any piece of fiction. And the entire tone of the game came across as failed satire, peak millennial writing where every single line in the game is a quip or a passive-aggressive response, and pretty much every NPC is an asshole to you. Oh, and to remind you for probably the third or fourth time over the past 5 years, Outer Worlds 1 actually cuckolds the player, because your first female companion and one of the only likable characters in the entire game is a lesbian, and her companion quest involves you helping her ask out a girl and setting up their date. And there is no player romance in The Outer Worlds, and the same goes for the sequel. That's not to mention the various gameplay issues that the first game had that I'm not going to go into here because obviously this is a video about the sequel. But just know that The Outer Worlds had many, many, many issues and is regarded by sane people as a mediocre at best game. And on top of all of this, Obsidian already released an RPG this year, Avowed. I know most of you probably forgot that came out this year. So obviously with modern development cycles being like 5 years, it was a huge red flag that Obsidian somehow was releasing 2 games in the same year. It's obvious to anyone paying attention that the scale of both these games would have to be dialed back significantly. And well, yeah, that obviously turned out to be the case. The actual amount of gameplay content in each game pales in comparison to Fallout New Vegas from 15 years ago. And Outer Worlds 2 makes no attempt to expand on the lack of ambition from the first game, and doesn't really improve any of the game mechanics or the poor writing, and arguably the plot is even worse than the first game, as we'll get into later in the video. So again, I am well aware that nobody actually cares about this game. The Steam player count for this is even lower than the first game's, and the first game had 1 year of early access on Epic Game Store, and yet somehow the Steam player count were higher for the first than this one. Now, of course, the extreme copium is that everyone's playing it on Game Pass. Yes, I'm sure 10 billion people signed up for Game Pass to play Outer Worlds 2. But seriously, nobody cares about this game except me. So the purpose of this video is not to convince you the game is bad or to get outraged about yet another woke slop video game in current year. I think it's obvious to pretty much anyone with still functioning pattern recognition skills that this game would be complete trash. I mean, one look at the aesthetic, and it's setting off a bunch of alarm bells in your head. This game is just ugly. I would even argue objectively ugly, if that's possible. A game truly made for activists and other far-left game developers. So I certainly wouldn't say the purpose of this video is to inform you. No, I think I got it across pretty succinctly during one of my streams. I'm the only human being who's playing this game. Like, there's not a single other human, the actual human, that is gonna play this game to completion. So I need to tell the world how shit it is, because the non-humans will tell you, no, actually it's good, guys, and no one's gonna bother to prove them wrong. Nobody, because no one's gonna play this. But enough rambling. I need to break down the specifics about why Outer Worlds 2 is an objectively bad game. So normally I would begin with the gameplay, but honestly, I don't see a point. The shooting mechanics are very generic in this game. Not necessarily bad, I would say mostly just acceptable with a few bullet spongy exceptions. So I'll break down the specific flaws later. For now, I'll just explain what exactly Outer Worlds is, because I can imagine imagine some of you have just heard the name and don't really know anything about the franchise. Well, to put it simply, it's another dystopian sci-fi world, very similar to Starfield, except this time the dystopia is more intentional. I assume that Outer Worlds is supposed to be satire, lampooning late-stage capitalism, but it's honestly hard to tell because of how unfunny it is. I know humor is subjective, but I genuinely don't think anybody is laughing at these dialogue lines. There's so many times I cringed over these two games. It genuinely just feels like they trained an AI on how Redditors talk and then generated the entire script based on that. Outer Worlds 2 has a lot of the same problems as Starfield. They're very comparable. I'd also say on some level it's comparable to Concord, at least in the horrifyingly disgusting aesthetic. At least minus the rip-off Guardians of the Galaxy aliens. There's actually no intelligent aliens at all in this game, again, much like Starfield. Instead, Outer Worlds is about the far future where corporations dominate the galaxy and can just straight up purchase star systems from the Earth government. It's supposed to be a retro-futuristic setting, but the art design is so weak that it's hard to tell what type of technology level the game is actually at. Some stuff looks almost steampunk, some stuff is clearly World War II inspired. Other elements just feel like a straight up ripoff of Star Wars, like the new quote-unquote fascist faction. The Protectorate is just the Empire, combined with some elements of Soviet Russia, a little bit of Judge Dredd here and there. But of course, way more stupid looking because we can't be taking any of this seriously because sincerity is dead. I think even the late-stage capitalism, heavily corporate aesthetic is messed up because none of this looks appealing. You'd think with 1,000 advertisements everywhere, you'd probably see something you'd want to buy. Instead, this just looks repulsive like everything else. Not one of these advertisements would be effective. There's also a bit of Futurama elements in there. Auntie Cleo is obviously Mom. Nothing about this feels original. It's just a hodgepodge of popular millennial media that the art designer saw. I get on some level, like I said at the beginning, that this is meant to be satire, but it is failed satire because it's not relatable, because it's not human. Because the people who made this shit are soulless golems, which I sure as hell hope that doesn't count as hate speech for any YouTube bots out there. I don't think golems are a protected class, at least I hope not. But before I delve into the story and characters of Outer Worlds 2, I'll give you a brief synopsis of Outer Worlds 1. In the first game, you play as a colonist who is taken out of cryosleep, and you discover that one of the two ships that was sent out to explore the Halcyon star system brought all of its passengers out of cryosleep way before yours, and so the system has already been taken over by the Corpos, the villains quite literally being called the Board. Wowie Zowie, a faceless corporation, what a compelling villain. And so you work with the discount Doc Brown / Rick Sanchez to save this solar system from the dangers of late-stage capitalism. And the commentary is about as on-the-nose as you would expect. People are working 120-hour work weeks, and all of the food is ultra-processed and has no nutritional value, so people are dying of malnutrition. Most of the citizens are brainwashed and just repeat corporate slogans as you talk to them, things like that, right? Stuff that gets really annoying really fast. And yet, strangely, the game is incredibly forgettable because I actually had to look up what the plot of the game was because I couldn't remember anything despite having spent probably about 40 hours playing through the whole story. I mean, essentially, you just explore a few planets, which are all just empty sandboxes. I will give the first game something over the second. There actually is one city when you explore the Corpo world. It's not a huge settlement, but it's actually bigger than anyone in the second game. So yes, the second game is less ambitious than the first. That's how you know it's a good sequel. And also, to the first game's credit, you could actually join the villains. Yeah, you could choose to side with the Board and enact their plan to cull the population to deal with the future mass starvation and possible rioting and all of that stuff, right? Again, I'm spoiling points from later in this video, but in Outer Worlds 2, you cannot side with the Protectorate. There is no option to join the villains in this supposed RPG. Why? Because it's problematic, Chud. You wouldn't want to join the Enclave, would you? Yeah, it reminds you of a certain extremely cringy Fallout New Vegas mod from a couple years back. But no, this is a professional AAA video game where the game devs are a bunch of massive pussies, terrified that the player might want to join with one of the cringiest fascist factions of all time, but we'll get into that later. And so the good ending involves you defeating the Board and helping Doc Brown awaken your fellow colonists out of cryosleep to save Halcyon, with the ending teasing the possibility that Earth has been destroyed. It definitely wasn't the best story by any stretch, but I wouldn't say it was terrible. If it wasn't for the incredibly insufferable dialogue, it would be okay. Now onto the plot of the second game. Instead of playing as a colonist, you're now an Earth Directorate agent, basically a space fed. And your mission is to travel to the Arcadia system to investigate the manufacturing of skip drives, which I guess is another word for warp drives, because using them is creating these rifts, which are destabilizing space, basically making like black holes. And so you need to stop the Protectorate from continuing to manufacture these, or they'll destroy all of reality itself. And no, the game does not answer the cliffhanger of, is Earth destroyed? In fact, they actually remind you of the cliffhanger of that ending in this game's ending. So I guess the writers actually fucking forgot that they even wrote that until the very end. The game begins with a pre-rendered cutscene showing you a recruitment propaganda film for joining the Earth Directorate in the guise of a adventure serial. And this very first scene in the game has a girl boss in it, really setting the tone, as you witness Commander Zane, this tall, muscular woman, and her useless sidekick who is a small, effeminate Zoomer man. And trust me, guys, this is the first of many, many girl bosses. I'm not going to go over every single one in this game. No! And I do want to clarify, when I say girl boss, I don't just mean they're boss bitches and they're mean to the player for no reason, even though that is also true. I mean, literally, these are women in charge who also happen to be insufferable to the player. The writers went out of their way to put women in positions of power in about every single area you can talk to non-hostile NPCs. The leaders of 2 of the 3 major factions are elderly white women. But don't think the Protectorate is based or anything. Trust me, it has plenty of girl bosses too, and a lot of diversity, just as much diversity as the other 2 factions. But I'm getting ahead of myself once again. So after this cutscene, we are brought into character creation, and much like many other modern character creators, this one is absolutely terrible. You can make a quadriplegic, essentially a nugget, chopping all of your limbs off and replacing them with prosthetics, but it is incredibly difficult to make a conventionally attractive character. Everyone looks like a hideous abomination, all the men have feminine eyes, and believe it or not, there is no slider for lips. Even though they have sliders for most of the rest of the face, you have to pick a default face to change the lips, and you cannot edit them further. I have no idea why. It probably has something to do with lip syncing, but considering that you never see your player character speak, it doesn't really make sense to me. As for the RPG mechanics, on some level, I should probably praise this aspect of the game, because you can tell, just like the first game, that Outer Worlds RPG mechanics were designed with replayability in mind. Unless you pick a specific trait, you can only specialize in 2 skills, and there are an incredible amount of skill checks in this game. You're going to come across one every 10 minutes of gameplay, spanning across all of the skills. I picked the brilliant trait so I could specialize in a 3rd one, and even then, you won't be able to complete the vast majority of skill checks in the game. Even something as universally applicable as speech doesn't come up as much as you'd think. I wouldn't be surprised if there's more science checks in this game than speech. Speaking of which, that's one of the ways you know this is a Reddit game, is science has an exclamation point after it. Trust the science gods! I mean, there's a fucking faction that worships a universal equation that predetermines all things in the universe or whatever. That's how Reddit this fucking franchise gets. Regardless, on paper, the skill system is probably better than most most RPGs. The thing is, in application, a lot of these skill checks don't really do anything. You can still complete pretty much any quest in the game without them, and a lot of times they don't even skip a step in the quest. So really the only times you're missing out on content is when the only way to get into a room is with lockpick or occasionally engineering or hacking. I picked engineering as one of my skills, and outside of it being the main crafting skill, it had very, very few skill checks in conversations and in the environment, which I guess makes sense given that, again, yeah, it's the skill for crafting, so it probably shouldn't be that universally useful. Much like Outer Worlds 1, you can pick a character background, which just gives you a lot of unique dialogue options throughout the game, and in a few cases actually allows you to pass certain skill checks without needing the appropriate skill. I picked Renegade, which is essentially just the Han Solo background, and holy shit, some of the cringiest lines in the game came from this, and ultimately turned out to be pretty useless. I don't think it could be used in substitute for a single skill check. As for traits, these all seem to be somewhat useful. I picked Brilliant, which allowed me to specialize in one additional skill, but Lucky has quite a few special skill checks throughout the game. And Innovative seems like it'd be pretty powerful if you're big on the crafting system. Ironically, even though I was an engineer, I didn't actually do that much crafting, because after a certain point in the game, money doesn't really matter anymore and you could just buy everything you'd possibly need. But I have to say, an element of the RPG mechanics that was disappointing is perks. Perks work just like New Vegas, you can only pick one every other level, but strangely, you don't usually unlock perks after investing 8 points in a skill, and they go up to 20. You would think out of all the skills, guns or explosives would unlock perks all the way up until 20, but they just don't. I don't know if Obsidian's trying to say you should invest in a bunch of different abilities, but it makes more sense to just put all of your points into something useful. Like if I have 20 guns, then I'm doing way more damage, and if I have 20 speech, then I can convince anybody to do anything, right? It actually felt like I made a mistake in the early game putting a few points into science, because it meant that I couldn't complete every single speech or engineering check. And I don't want to overload you with too much information here, but I also just so happen to be under-leveled for about half of the game, and I have no idea why. I actually did over half of the side quests in the game. In any case, I think the skill system was handled well, but the perks were somewhat disappointing. They didn't really affect my playstyle in any significant way. I basically just picked everything that added into my overall DPS. Shockingly, speech actually increases your damage with guns with a specific perk, which, yeah, whatever. I'm not going to question it. More damage is good. Now, moving on from character creation, getting back to the story. As soon as you take control of your character, the very first NPC in the game you meet is a black guy named Niles, and he will be your first companion. And I already know what you're expecting me to say, given my reputation, but you would be wrong. If you watch the streams, you know Niles is the least insufferable companion in the game. In fact, he feels like the only fully developed character out of all of your companions as well. So, although yes, it was clearly a very deliberate choice that only one of your companions in this game is white, and it's a woman, so yeah, there is no white male companion in this, which is ironic because Vicar Max was the best companion in the first game. I guess the devs didn't like that everyone liked the white guy. So in Outer Worlds 2, it's a complete diversity squad that just looks utterly repulsive and unlikable for the most part. But I was very shocked that Niles was a more likable character than essentially the Judge Dredd companion of the game, Tristan, who we'll get to later. But in this tutorial mission, he is a new cadet, and obviously he looks up to you since you're the captain of the ship. And you'll notice this game has the whole telltale, blank will remember this, pretending that there's any consequences for your dialogue choices. But as far as I can tell, all it does is influence what binary path you tell the character to go down at the end of their companion quest. So I can't say that it's a lie that the NPC will remember the dialogue line you choose, but it is mostly meaningless, just like Telltale games. After this conversation, you are introduced to your crew, who are a bunch of red shirts throwing very obvious death flags. And then we speak to our contact, Augustine de Vries. Now, the game hypes up how badass this chick is at multiple points. How she is one of the greatest examples of an Earth Directorate agent. This woman, and we're all supposed to act like this is normal. And for no reason whatsoever, it is established in this conversation that both de Vries and Niles are sexually interested in one another. They just had to slip in a little miscegenation in there. I'm sure that has nothing to do with political ideology whatsoever. And she has infiltrated the Protectorate since they're the most incompetent fascist faction of all time. She does multiple absurd things throughout the story right behind their backs, and they never suspect her. So thanks to her, you're able to infiltrate one of their stations, you fight your way through, and suddenly everything goes wrong as Augustine de Vries has betrayed you, getting your entire team killed except for Niles, who has half of his face burnt and his arm gets chopped off somehow. As much as I wanted to put him out of his misery, there is no player choice here. And so you chase her down, and no matter what you choose here, she sets the station to blow. You just barely escape in a convenient nearby escape pod, and you float adrift in space unfound for 10 years until Niles finally discovers your pod and brings you out of stasis. De Vries blowing up the station has made everything worse in Arcadia, creating a giant rift in the system that will essentially destroy everything within the next 10 years. And so it's up to you to stop her and somehow collapse this huge rift in Arcadia to save the whole system. Something interesting here is that if you buy the Ultimate Edition of the game, as soon as you take control of the player character after the tutorial mission, the Earth Directorate has found a flaw with you: consumerism. Yes, the devs actually mock you for paying for early access to play this game. That early access being 5 days, by the way, because they knew this shit was bombing. The pre-order numbers were in the toilet, and they have the nerve to make a cheeky joke about being a consumer. Your first destination is Paradise Island on the planet of Eden, which was her last known location. Joining you is not only Niles, but your second companion, a robot named Valerie. Now, given how utterly disgusting and broadly unfuckable the vast majority of female NPCs are in this game, you might have had the idea that maybe you could stick it in the floating robot. Well, of course, the Stunning and Braid developers at Obsidian thought of that and give you this incredibly awkward exchange.
Upgrades are recommended to improve your experience of Valerie. Please do not attempt physical intimacy with your Valerie unit. Acknowledged.
And yeah, that's just the tip of the iceberg for cringy dialogue in this game. As I said earlier, there is no player romance in the Outer Worlds 2. Probably because half of the characters are self-inserts for the fucking rainbow-haired developers. Not that you'd actually want to romance any of these abominations anyway, except for maybe the ginger cultist chick. But whatever, let's move on. Instead of having one giant sandbox like an Elder Scrolls game or Fallout, it's a series of much smaller sandboxes with slightly more densely packed content. Or at least it is for the first planet. The second, third, and fourth planets are all a series of mini wastelands with barely anything worth doing on them. Much like the first Outer Worlds, the first planet clearly had the most effort put into the game design, and either they didn't have the time, the budget, or the ambition to complete the other three. Since I don't want this to be anywhere near as long as the Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 video, I'm going to sum up your objective on this first planet and only cover the very few noteworthy side quests as they come up. Basically, your objective is simple. You need to make your way to the Vox Station. Unfortunately, to get there, you have to cross a bridge which is heavily guarded by Protectorate troops who are not going to let anyone pass the checkpoint. Now, there are several different ways that you can get across the bridge, which I definitely have to give Obsidian credit for this, because it actually felt like there was genuine player choice here. The main method of getting across the bridge would be siding with Auntie's Choice, which is one of the two major factions you can side with in this game. Yes, you heard me right. 2. This game has a faction system like Fallout New Vegas, but there are only 2 factions in the game. Actually, I discovered later there's technically 3, but the third one has no main story relevance whatsoever. I'll clarify that point later. Now, I highly suspect that the Protectorate was going to be the third faction earlier in development, and it was cut. And there's quite a lot of evidence in-game to support that theory, which I'll cover later. For those of you who have played the first game, Auntie's Choice might sound a little familiar because it is a merger between Auntie Cleo and Spacer's Choice, which were 2 of the biggest brands. The only explanation in-game is that Spacer's Choice tried to dissolve Auntie Cleo through some legal mumbo-jumbo, and then Auntie Cleo just took them over with her military might or something, I don't know. And putting aside my personal politics, I can't be the only one who thinks it's idiotic to kill off arguably the most iconic thing from the first game, which is the Moon Man, right? The big old moon head. That's probably the only thing that pops in your head when you think of Outer Worlds. Well, now it doesn't even actually exist anymore outside of the title screen. As to why they're here in Arcadia, of course, in true corporate fashion, they've invaded a new star system and just started killing all of the inhabitants and taking over their towns. Okay, obviously I'm slightly exaggerating. Canonically, they only killed the local military, but this is a totalitarian government that literally brainwashes all of its citizens with something called mental refreshment. How the hell would you get these people to buy your products? I just don't think if hypothetically Kellogg's invaded Soviet Russia back in the day and killed Stalin, that all of the Russian citizens would start buying Apple Jacks and start working for the company. But honestly, I'm reading into this a little too much. This is not meant to be an immersive universe. This is supposed to be comedy with several quotes. You know, something akin to Futurama. I'm not supposed to think about it. But to get back to the story, as part of the main quest, you wander into the mayor's office of Fairfield and eavesdrop on Auntie Cleo, the CEO of Auntie's Choice, chewing out 2 of her subordinates for arguing about the state of Paradise Island. Auntie Cleo is obviously another extreme girl boss, a 60-year-old woman who is the head of the biggest mega corporation in the galaxy. Like I said before, an obvious ripoff of Mom from Futurama. I don't think they even tried to hide the heavy inspiration here. I honestly didn't get much of a chance to talk to her throughout the playthrough because if you don't side with her faction, the only other time you ever interact with her in this game is to kill her. The replacement mayor, this Minister Milverstreet guy, is essentially just an effeminate soy boy salesman type, one of many, many flamboyant characters in the Outer Worlds universe. And the chief of security is a black woman. Yes, the strongest, the toughest, and most qualified human here is a sassy black woman named Carr who openly talks shit about Milverstreet and your player character to our faces, and we're supposed to just accept this. You know, I think I'm starting to understand why they mock the idea of a meritocracy in this game. And you have to be aware, this is pretty much your first introduction to the Auntie's Choice faction. So already, I wanted to side against these people. I wanted to kill them all, and thankfully, that is one thing you can actually do in this game. Now, any NPC that's actually important has an absolute fuck ton of health. No, not the mayor, he dies in one shot because he's a little sissy white boy. No, this black woman can take about 20 shots to the face, the first of many bullet sponges in this game. But in the interest of actually making an honest effort to evaluate this game, I decided not to kill everyone here. No, instead of massacring Fairfield, I decided to accept as many quests as possible. So at this point, the main quest splits off. Like I mentioned before, you have several ways of getting across the bridge, and you're offered 2 options right here. You can either help Millstreet gain access to the secrets of mental refreshment from the Protectorate, and in this quest is where we meet our third companion, who I actually never recruited and indirectly killed, but yes, she's another girl boss, an Asian one, with like a giant mutant arm, and she's another character that talks shit to your face. Option B is that you disable the Protectorate's nearby automech repair facility. And option B is the one that I stuck with at first, but shockingly enough, you actually have an option to repair the facility, but since the Protectorate has no faction reputation, this has no effect on the broader game whatsoever. It is never brought up again. The only possible purpose I could see for helping the Protectorate here is if you want to do Westport's quest to get across the bridge, because they were a former Protectorate settlement but have no direct association with them anymore. But one of the quests there requires you to get a part from the automech repair facility. In any case, this is probably as good a time as any to start talking about side quests. I think Paradise Island is the only map out of the 4 that actually has interesting ones worth talking about on some level. Again, much like the first Outer Worlds, you can tell they put all of the effort into the first level, and then it severely drops off a cliff as you get further and further into the game. The most significant side quest in the entire game is arguably the very first one you're going to come across, the one to get the thruster boots, which give you a double jump. I don't think I need to explain the utility of being able to double jump, especially when a lot of the game seems to be designed around it. So obviously this is a side quest you're going to want to do in every single playthrough, and it's very simple. There's a joke about some Auntie's Choice morons getting stuck up really high and they have no way down, and one of them heroically jumped to their death because it was a former Protectorate member, and in a different side quest, you can frame it as a loyal citizen boldly sacrificing themselves to clog up the gears so that Auntie's Choice scientists couldn't further their work. Hilarious. Speaking of the other side quest I just mentioned, the second objective requires you to find a traitor in Westport. A man is suspected of defecting to Auntie's Choice, but how can we prove it? Could it be that he has Purpleberry Crunch smeared all over his lips? You see what I mean about this being incredibly unfunny? As I mentioned before, there's a second settlement on this island, Westport, and its leader was the former Vigilant of Paradise Island, which is, I guess, like the commissar of the Protectorate, but he got exiled since he failed to protect the island from the Auntie's Choice forces. And so he just kind of made his own settlement, and everyone's fine with this, I suppose. But I want to point out that this supposedly fascist or communist or I don't even know what the fuck discount empire, incredibly incompetent evil faction has a black man as one of its major leaders. There's a certain elephant in the room that I'm avoiding here about the Protectorate that, don't worry, I'll get to later. Every single person who watches the streams knows what I'm talking about. After helping him with the automech repair parts, you actually get another unique way across the bridge, this time using your double jump boots, and he gives you a code phrase to give one of the Vox Station Protectorate soldiers so that he'll side with you against the leader of that installation who's gone crazy and started executing people out of his paranoia. Now, something that you might have noticed over the course of me explaining these side quests is that I have not just sided with one, nor two, but 3 different major Protectorate faction members. But because the Protectorate is not counted as a faction, when you cross the bridge to go to the Vox Station, all of the soldiers are still hostile to you. So all of this effort is utterly meaningless, despite the fact that I somewhat praise the player choice to give you several different options to cross the bridge. You might as well just say fuck it to all of that and just shoot every Protectorate NPC you come across, because none of it affects anything. Player choice my fucking ass. Again, I don't know if it was cut for time, I highly doubt it. Or more likely for political reasons, the developers didn't want you to side with the icky fascies. The funny thing is, it's not even a fascist government or a communist one. It's a monarchy. Their leader is called the Sovereign. He's part of a royal bloodline that basically founded this empire, or whatever the fuck it is. And you know what? It fucking gets even worse, man. I've been avoiding the elephant in the room every time I bring up the Protectorate, but fuck it. Let's just jump the gun and bring it up right now. The founder of the Protectorate is a woman called the Matriarch. Yes, the evil faction in this game puts pussy on a pedestal just as much as the other 2 factions. You can't make this up. Even the one faction led by a man worships a fucking woman. So the more you think about the Protectorate, the less it fucking makes sense, but who cares? You're not supposed to think about it. They just represent the right-wing chuds. Why would you ever want to side with the chuds? Are you a fucking piece of shit? Are you racist, sexist, etc., etc.? Even though their faction is just as diverse as the other factions, because the devs are too goddamn cowardly to even portray their enemies in fiction. Is it a wonder why The Outer Worlds has no fans? Because this series has no fucking identity. Because it can't be offensive to anyone. It is more woke slop Concord-like garbage. But I had to get a little bit of my frustration out there because this is genuinely the worst evil faction I've ever seen in any video game, because it is exactly the same as the other two factions. They have no ethnic identity, no gender identity. They have no fucking culture other than just mocking totalitarian dictatorship practices like brainwashing people. Oh, and honor and loyalty are unironically portrayed as bad things. Hell, wait till we get to the actual Protectorate companion, and you'll see how absurd this truly gets. But we gotta get a move on, because this video ain't gonna be 2 hours long, I swear. So we might as well talk about the shooting, because you're gonna be doing a hell of a lot of shooting in this game. Despite this being, you know, a Western RPG with also a fuck ton of dialogue, you probably do just as much shooting as talking, which I'm not going to say the shooting is garbage. I think it's okay. Emphasis on okay. I was min-max for damage, so only a select few boss-type enemies were legitimately bullet sponges. For the most part, I'd say enemies die in a handful of shots at the very most, and by the end game, I was just using a reskinned M14, and that could 1 or 2 tap about 90% of the enemies in the game. I would say the major problem with the shooting has nothing to do with bullet sponginess or gun feel or any of that. Part of it is just due to lack of creativity. Most of the guns are just reskins of real-world guns, despite this being, you know, a sci-fi setting. The only creative weapons are like a goo gun. It fires goo. It's nothing you haven't already seen before. I swear the first game's science weapons were more creative than this. It's possible that I maybe missed a few, but I tried picking up every weapon I found, and for the most part, there was no reason not to just use whatever weapon took heavy rounds. I don't think the developers really understand the concept of damage per second, because for some reason, heavy machine guns have like twice as much DPS as any other weapon type. The only thing that's going to stop you from using them is ammo. Even though you can craft your own ammo with engineering, it's never enough. So by the time I was 2/3 of the way through the game, I didn't really need money anymore, so I just spent everything on heavy rounds. Every single vending machine, I bought out their inventory. As for other combat mechanics, you have gadgets that you acquire across the main story and a side quest or two. But for the most part, you're only going to be using one gadget across the entire game, and it's not time dilation like the first. No, it's the shield. You get access to a shield when you do the quest to either repair or destroy the automech repair facility. And the shield works exactly like a shield in Halo. It's basically just a free extra health bar that recharges, and you can use it all the time. And I have no idea if this is intentional or not, but defense seems to be broken in this game. It doesn't matter if you wear light armor or heavy armor, you still die in like 5 shots. So obviously the shield gadget is going to be the most useful item in the entire game, because it essentially doubles the amount of rounds you can take before you die, and you end up saving 1,000,000 healing items as well. The other 3 gadgets are time dilation like the first game, which lets you slow down time, pretty self-explanatory. N-ray goggles, which let you see N-rays. Gee, I wonder what the N stands for. This is just used to see invisible enemies at a couple points in the game, and also allow you to solve a few puzzles. And finally, an acid spitter that lets you melt bodies, which is really only useful for stealth. I never really used stealth at any point, because if enemies die in 2 or 3 shots, then what the fuck's the point of stealth? Especially since you kill hundreds of enemies over the course of this game. I guess one of the few things I could praise about the combat system is the healing. It's pretty much the same as the first game, but I do think Outer Worlds had a clever solution for the typical RPG problem of carrying around 100 healing items. Your inhaler has a toxicity value, and if your toxicity exceeds 100, then you can't use any healing until it runs out, right? So you need to be very careful about how you heal. The problem is, like I mentioned before, the armor system just doesn't fucking work. So if you get shot more than twice, you're probably going to need to heal. And although I picked a perk called Serial Killer, which gave me +2 max health every time I killed an innocent person, and there's a % chance anytime I kill any humanoid of getting one, I had so much health that inhalers could never heal me to full, but I still died in, I don't know, 5 or 6 shots. So it ended up biting me in the ass a little bit. As for your companions, they work basically exactly the same as the first game. They'll aid you in combat, they have special abilities, which are usually fairly useful effects, like Valerie can heal you, Niles can taunt all the enemies, and I'll talk about the other characters when we get to them later. It is so obvious that there's only about 15 hours of worthwhile content in this game, and I say that in quotes, of course, because I think this game just kind of sucks in general. But I'd say quality content that is worth the player's time is probably about 15 hours, and they extended that with an excessive amount of dialogue and an excessive amount of shooting. There's only a handful of true enemy types in this game, because shooting every human is exactly the same, doesn't matter what faction they're from, gameplay-wise, functionally the same. And the animal enemy types, they actually recycled 2 of the major ones from the last game. Yes, Mantisaurs and Raptidons were from Outer Worlds 1. And they are the major enemy types you fight in Outer Worlds 2, despite being in a completely different solar system with new planets. That's how fucking lazy these developers are. So combat encounters get really old really fast. Probably the only vaguely interesting enemy types in this game are the mechs, and even then, they're bullet sponges, so that's not really very fun, but at least it gave me a reason to use electric weapons instead of just heavy rounds the entire game. So yeah, the combat is competent, but it's excessive. I mean, there's probably twice as many combat encounters compared to something like Fallout New Vegas. It feels like this game has barely any true exploration to the dungeons. It's just a series of hallways where you shoot things over and over again. And even then, there aren't even that many dungeons, and there's almost no reason to actually visit a dungeon if you don't have a side quest that leads you there. With one major exception on the 3rd planet in the game that we'll get to later. So yeah, get ready to do a lot of fucking shooting in this game, and even on normal difficulty, your character is made of glass, which definitely didn't get annoying at all, guys. So again, I have to say combat is serviceable, because I think on some level Obsidian knew, since so much of this game is combat, it had to at least be okay. But it gets really repetitive really fast with the lack of enemy variety. I think basically every major enemy type shows up in the first 2 planets. So the second half of the game is just shooting the same stuff as the first half, and in fact, I think there's even more combat encounters in the second half of the game, because they were getting lazy and needed to pad out the length of this to at least 30 hours. But enough about combat, getting back to the main mission. If you decide to help out the former Vigilant, you can sneak past the front door with the help of a, dare I say, a female. Ew, icky. And inside, you meet a guy called Marshall Corbin, who you might remember from the tutorial mission of the game. I say might because actually I'd completely forgotten, even though this is probably only 4 hours of gameplay later. And through him, you can find an alternative way of dealing with Brigadier Montelli, the evil commander of this facility. But fighting my way to him was incredibly painful. The game attempted to give a stealth route if you didn't want to shoot everyone inside, but it seemed really poorly crafted. I'm not entirely sure how you're actually supposed to get past some of these enemies without getting discovered, but ultimately, what does it matter if the Protectorate doesn't have faction reputation? Might as well just kill everyone. Well, unfortunately, the final room before you get to the boss has 2 mechs, which at this point in the game were very hard to kill because I was under-leveled, as I mentioned a while back. So one incredibly painful combat encounter later, we hear the villain give his evil speech, and actually, everything he says about the Protectorate is right here.
Auntie's choice. Bah! The invaders are vacuous opportunists dead from the collar up. They would not have found purchase here if not for the festering rot already in our soil. Prove me false. You cannot. Our great protectorate has lost its way. Years of comfort and plenty have softened us, made us weak, undisciplined. If not for the consul, all would fall to ruin. The Protectorate survives not on empty will, but on those with a mind for strategy and the stomach for war.
Regardless, we have to terminate this bucket head and investigate the next room. Of course, Augustine de Vries isn't here, but we find a suspicious chocolate bar. Just read this fucking text here, man. De Vries does not strike you as a patron of the confectionery arts. God, the cringe, it never ends. And yes, somehow she installed a secret room in this facility while she was working for the incredibly incompetent Protectorate. And viewing this message she left behind triggers a self-destruct sequence of sorts, where the entire station is going to launch into the air and crash down on top of Fairfield, killing everyone. This is the first and arguably the only major moral choice you can make in the game, where you can choose to either let it kill all the mindless consumers, or have it crash on top of Westport to kill all the former fascies slash commies slash I don't even know what to call these morons anymore. If you have enough hack or the lucky trait, you can also send it straight into space, saving everyone. Since I don't have either one of those, and I was trying to help the Protectorate throughout the first half of this playthrough in any way possible, of course I just let it crash down on top of Fairfield. Why wouldn't I? And so, despite killing dozens of people, I only lose 10 faction reputation with Auntie's choice, which, believe it or not, was not enough to put me in the red after completing a couple of their side quests. So ultimately, I got away with it, and I indirectly killed the companion I mentioned earlier. And for the cherry on top of this shit cake, I went back to Westport and tried talking to the former Vigilant, and I'm just noticing now his name is Hogarth, as if they couldn't make this any more distracting. And he doesn't even have a new line of dialogue. It's as if the developers all expected the player to kill everyone in Westport. They would never take out Fairfield in a million years, so they didn't even bother giving him an extra line of dialogue to acknowledge everyone died in Fairfield mysteriously. Or that you even accomplished the mission he sent you there to do, which is to take out Montelli. No, not even one line of dialogue for that? Okay, this game is fucking unfinished. Believe it or not, up until this point, the game is somewhat tolerable outside of the incredibly cringy dialogue. I think from a gameplay perspective, the open world design here is perfectly serviceable. The only real problem I have is that exploration is not really rewarded in this game. There's not much of a reason to actually check out the mini sandbox unless you already have a quest telling you to go there. There was a crab boss I couldn't even fight because I didn't have the Corpo companion with me. So it's just like an empty cave where I can't even really interact with anything. Now, as for the other 3 planets, the amount of worthwhile content drops off a cliff. So although many of you are probably looking at the length of this video and thinking, ah, fuck, we're only a fourth of the way through this, there's not nearly as much to talk about when it comes to the rest of the game. Now, before we move on to the next planet, there's a strange location that feels unfinished that you unlock at this point. It's an Auntie's Choice ship that has been taken over, and it's called the Free Market Station. It's out in the middle of nowhere. And I thought this place would be a quest hub, similar to the second location from the first game, but despite talking to pretty much every NPC here, I could only find 2 quests. One of those 2 quests is to give us our Protectorate companion for the game, Tristan. But it doesn't make any sense that they'd have this place that just has like 5 generic shops, but there's no quests. And I was actually wrong about there only being 2 factions in the game, as Sub Rosa, which is basically a mafia of some kind, has its own reputation system, but that whole faction only has maybe 3 or 4 quests in the whole game? Something that I don't get is why these modern Bethesda-like games seem to think adding a bunch of nameless NPCs with no dialogue increases immersion. If anything, it's the opposite. I'm sure there's plenty of people who complained back in the day that the Imperial City in Oblivion didn't have enough NPCs, but if the alternative is adding 100 that have nothing to say, they have no unique schedules, they don't have any of the things that made Bethesda games unique, I think that would just objectively water down the game because it reduces the exploration factor. Why would I explore every single building for quests to find if 90% of them have nothing of value in them? That was one of the main complaints of Starfield, and it looks like The Outer Worlds has the same exact problem. You could easily cut this location out of the game and lose nothing of value. It's yet another unfinished element. In any case, let's briefly discuss Tristan because he represents yet another problem with the Protectorate. He is an arbiter, which is basically judge, jury, and executioner. He's a ripoff of Judge Dredd, except incredibly fucking lame, dude. Oh my god. Oh my god. No!
This is my emotional support arbiter. I need him to do my work.
I'm... what? Emotional support? You know, that has a nicer ring to it than I'd have surmised. I've never been emotional support before.
You would think conceptually the idea of an arbiter as your teammate is pretty cool because he's just gonna go out there and kill everyone who fucks with him. Because apparently arbiters in the Protectorate don't even need evidence to prosecute people. They could just kill people on a whim if they want. Let's get into the problems with Tristan. The first and most obvious one is that this would have been a perfect opportunity to have a white male protagonist. I'm actually kind of shocked the developers didn't seize this opportunity to make fun of chuds or something. You know, have him be really racist, sexist, an obvious incel type character. Essentially a straw man for the creators to beat up, right? But I guess they didn't want to have a single, ironically likable character in this game. We can't portray our enemies in any possible positive light, so let's just not portray them at all, I suppose would be the logic of the devs. The second problem is that they're not very consistent with the Judge Dredd thing. In fact, he is a horrible citizen of the Protectorate because, like I mentioned earlier, the Protectorate doesn't have any faction reputation. So despite having Tristan in your party, Protectorate soldiers still attack you on sight. This is so unbelievably lazy, it is barely explained with like a one-off line.
Those fools! Protectorate subjects should know better than to attack a Protectorate arbiter. I had no choice but to judge them as traitors to the Protectorate. Why would they simply open fire? Why wouldn't they attempt to conversate? Then they should have reported me to their superiors rather than attempting to exact justice themselves. I shall continue to answer slights of this nature through violence. But hopefully, I shall not need to do this more than a few times.
And the other party members don't really care that he's on your side either. I mean, they'll be wary and not trust him, but nobody threatens to leave just because he joins. The way the arbiters are explained in-universe makes it sound like if any of the party members wronged him, he'd shoot them in the face. But he's a complete fucking pussy, and this is actually explained why in his companion quest. This is the shit that blew my mind. I actually got infuriated when they explained this part. His entire companion quest revolves around researching the assassination of the Supreme Arbiter, which I guess would be the equivalent of a Supreme Court member. Not only is the Supreme Arbiter a woman who taught Tristan everything he knows, but also she had the incredibly novel idea of investigating a crime before enacting justice. Yes, this is a real fucking line of dialogue in this game. Not to mention, one of your dialogue lines is fucking lampshading this so hard. I cringed so fucking hard, man. Pointing it out does not make it better. I don't care that you're self-aware that your writing is bad. This is embarrassing. Your player character is so fucking snarky, like a Redditor at times. It is painful. Would you believe me if I said the worst dialogue lines in the game don't come from any of these quirky rainbow-haired characters, but actually from the player?
I tell you my big complaint about my neighbor, but they're standing pretty close. Oh my god. Oh no, thank you, but I couldn't possibly indulge when there's mischief afoot.
How is that a brilliant... What the Who wrote it?
Sounds like you're seriously denigrating the work of your colleagues. Pleased to meet you, former Endpoint Delgado. I don't know what to call you now. When you have me killed doesn't exactly speak to your qualities as a host either. Your calculations are falling apart. Stand down or I'll have to take you apart. Those with power and bits will always exploit those without. This is inevitable. I put down a lot of yappy folk in my day. Got one more standing for me. Dude, it's so bad. There's no way the dev team thought this was good. Oh my god, here we go. Every line is Reddit. Every one of them. So, we're just casually admitting to war crimes now?
And look, I realize I have a hate speech striking my channel right now, so I better be careful about what I say next. But do you really expect me to believe a woman had the novel idea of innocent until proven guilty after the fucking era of the Me Too movement, where everyone was guilty until proven innocent? It didn't matter how many men were falsely accused, we were still told to listen and believe every woman. Even if they potentially ruin a man's life forever and it's exposed that they lied, all they get is a slap on the wrist. And you know what's insanely ironic about this entire thing? Chris Avallone, former writer at Obsidian, credited for writing basically all of the original Fallout lore, got blacklisted from the game industry because of false Me Too accusations. You know, I can be a little bit of a schizo sometimes, but this really feels like it's spitting in his face in particular. No, if anything, women would swallow up this totalitarian government in a fucking second. Yeah, everyone is guilty, prosecute them all, who cares about evidence? My fucking feelings told me he's wrong. God damn, woke doesn't even begin to describe shit like this. Honestly, we need a better word for it because this is truly disgusting and delusional, because it doesn't matter if you take this shit seriously or not. It's worming its way into your brain and normalizing absurd assertions. But regardless of all that, I'm not going to get into Tristan's companion quest just yet. I'll save that for the third planet. Okay, moving on to the next planet, Dorado. We've gone from a tropical island setting with weird pink and red plants everywhere to make it feel more alien, I guess, to a generic desert, which I can't say is much better. As a map, this is much worse than the first one. There's so much more empty space, with random ass little bandit camps that don't have anything of value in them, just more targets to shoot, with meaningless loot that you'll sell for money that doesn't even matter after the halfway point in the game. Something I didn't cover in the combat section was the loot, because there's really not much to talk about. Much like the first Outer Worlds, the game has tiered loot, where after a certain point in the game, you'll find assault rifles that just are objectively better in every way than the old ones and use the same ammo type as well. While there are some cases of this in Fallout New Vegas, there are so many different ammo types that the tiered loot system didn't feel that intrusive. There's a huge variety of different weapons, but like I mentioned earlier, the devs didn't really seem to care too much about weapon balance, so you're probably just going to use the same few guns that have much higher DPS than the rest. This is not a loot game like Borderlands, where you'll find epic rarity loot that has a bunch of special attachments or something. I did find some green guns, which already had one attachment on them, but that's it. I never found like a purple or a legendary. No, there's some unique weapons, but ultimately not really that many. Most of the ones I did find seem to be gimmick weapons that weren't any better than the ones I was already using. And so that's all I'm going to say about loot, because we got to get through this fucking story. So the gimmick of this planet is the Order of the Ascendant is at war with Auntie's choice. Now I realize I haven't really talked about the Order of the Ascendant yet. Their entire gimmick is that they're a bunch of math nerds that belong to a religion that worships this ultimate equation that predetermines everything in the universe. And so they think if they solve this equation, it'll remove all suffering because every event in the universe is predetermined or something like that. I don't know. They are clearly supposed to be the closest thing to a good faction in this game, but even then, I think if you could take away any moral lesson from the Outer Worlds universe, it's that power always corrupts. It's not that absolute power corrupts absolutely, or even that power doesn't corrupt, it just reveals your true self. No, it's anyone in a position of power does become corrupt. That's why I say this is truly a communist game, because there is no good faction except the mindless, innocent masses. No, of course, the proletariat didn't do nothing. All of the factions are some shade of evil. I wouldn't even say morally gray, truly, but the Order of the Ascendant is the closest thing to a good faction, and of course, they're the most boring one. And also, it's yet another example of propaganda being shoved in your face, because despite being the math nerd faction, most of the people in charge are not, white males like they are in real life in STEM fields. No, miraculously, there's plenty of black women in the math nerd faction. This is never addressed at any level. You're just supposed to accept this as normal because, again, that's the politics of the people who made the game. So the big crisis on this planet is twofold. One, the incredibly incompetent Protectorate has pulled out after being defeated by both Auntie's Choice and the Order of the Ascendant, which split away from the Protectorate recently. And so there's a countless amount of refugees who are looking for shelter, and of course only the Order of the Ascendant will take them in. The second crisis is that Auntie's Choice and the Order of the Ascendant are at war since Auntie's Choice wants to dominate this whole star system. And when you arrive on the planet, a nuclear explosion happens at the Auntie's Choice settlement. And this happens after they recently agreed to a ceasefire. And so one of the major side quests here has you investigating what happened and trying to smooth things over with Auntie's Choice so that they don't start warring with each other again. Because one of your major choices later in the game is you can have Auntie's Choice and Order of the Ascendant work together to stop the evil Protectorate. Not to spoil the end of the plot, but let's just say I didn't pick either option. So on our journey across Dorado, we recruit our last two companions, the first of which being an Indian grandma assassin named Marisol. I wish that was an exaggeration, but genuinely she's supposed to be some kind of like Spec Ops Fed, and this is part of the math nerd faction. This is definitely someone's self-insert character. Just look at these dialogue options.
I am a dedicated agent of the Order, but no, dear. My name is not Miriam Alva. I am Marisol Delgado.
Delgado.
Causal redirection.
That group was just a story to scare novice scienticians. Next, you're going to be telling me you're... Wait. It is you, isn't it? The one they called the Endpoint.
Okay, you know what? I'm glad I streamed the end of this quest. Excuse me? Oh my god. Oh, we gotta hear the explanation for this one.
The Endpoint. Wish I had a cool code name.
No one would ever say that. Ever! Look at these fucking dialogue lines. Which one is like, you really expect me to believe an old hag is some badass? That is what one of these lines should be. But no. I'm not allowed to say she's not cool. This is someone's self-insert character. What a fucking joke. You'll realize you'll only get killed if you try to stop her. We're pretending the grandma's a threat. This is a real line in the video game. And she's probably the best party member in the game too, just to rub it in. The quest to recruit her is a pain in the ass. Takes way too long running around this facility, investigating shit when I didn't even have the right skills for any of the checks anyway. But it doesn't matter if you do or don't, because she just takes control of the situation, because she's suspected of launching the nuke. Of course, she didn't do it. And at the end of the quest, even if your investigation goes horribly wrong, she still just kills the fucking bitch in charge of the facility. Wow, what a quest. As for the other companion you recruit, it is an evil cultist who was almost killed by her own companions. It's sad because she's the closest thing to an attractive woman in this game, but they couldn't even stick to the psycho bitch. She keeps apologizing for her behavior indirectly, almost like a teenager embarrassed of saying edgy things. The only reason I kept her around is because she never objected to me killing people, which is something I started doing a lot later. In any case, I haven't even mentioned what we're supposed to be doing with the main quest. Obviously, we're still trying to track down Augustine de Vries. This takes us to the planet of Dorado because we were informed earlier that she joined the side of the Order of the Ascendant because she thinks only their mystical algorithm can solve the issues of the rifts in this star system. And I think you already know where this is going. You could see it a mile away. Yes, the villain was right about everything the whole time. The only reason we're even mad at her is because it involved trying to kill us, the player, in the process of closing the rifts. Though her plan failed, obviously. So tracking her down eventually leads us to the N-Ray facility, and we acquire some N-Ray goggles, which allow us to see invisible enemies and also the wiring for certain switches for a few puzzles scattered throughout the game. The gadget really doesn't do anything else. If you pick perks in the science tree, it can up critical hits, I guess, but that's nowhere near as useful as the shield. And after fighting our way through the booby trap facility, we come across Brian C. after Breakers shuts down. Wait, what? And this conversation was so bad, I'm just gonna play some of it for you.
To save Arcadia, to ensure the future, we must both die.
Arcadia has fallen, billions must die. Someone's about to fucking bomb, and you say there's always a choice, you know, worthless platitude, which is not gonna stop anybody. You call him insane. Yep, that'll stop him. Or you reference the villain and then just ask why he's helping. Why would he answer? Why would he answer? He's about to blow himself up. This is terrible. Have the writers ever spoken to a human being? No way. Don't do anything you'll regret. He's about to blow himself up. Is everyone on the dev team autistic or retarded?
If it could prevent needless death, why not try?
That's so bad.
Even when the perfect path is offered to them, people will still deviate from it.
But surely, over time, these deviations would subside? Though I do not seek the abolition of free will, no. No, humanity would do what is best for itself, I'm sure.
These people have no convictions. This is supposed to be a religion worshipping an equation. And they're like, no, I wouldn't remove free will. Isn't the whole point like everything's predetermined anyway?
Someone afraid of living to see the consequences of his actions. Where's consequence culture?
I've been a fool going along with this farce.
This poor fool seemed intent on doing himself and us both. Impressive work convincing him otherwise. Let's say I have a go at him with my disemboweling knife. See what he knows.
Be my guest. I look forward to seeing your work.
Might want to stand back. This could get messy. If I do it right. I knew the little fellow was lacking in fortitude, but I must admit to a certain inexplicable dismay.
She didn't even dismember him. This game has dismemberment.
Just got the better of me.
That's just lazy. Now, if you manage to talk this guy down, it actually makes the following mission a little bit easier, but before we get to that, there is one side quest on this planet I have to cover because it is one of the most painful that I've had to go through in any RPG. The setup for this quest is what I mentioned earlier. We need to smooth things out between Auntie's choice and the Order of the Ascendant. So we head to the rubble of the blown up settlement. And the corporate commander there is the most stereotypical, we'll just say Israeli, because I guess it's okay to criticize that group of people right now, caricature I've seen in a while. This guy does not really give a fuck that the whole town got blown up and everyone's dead. He just cares about being promoted up the corporate ladder and getting paid. So you have an option of doing one of 3 quests or just bribing him to solve the problem. I decided to do one of the quests, again, for the sake of the review. And the conflict of this quest is that for some reason, corporate has promoted a mantisaur, which is basically a giant praying mantis, to be in charge of one of their factories. Now, I don't think I have to explain what the joke about corporate incompetence is here. But as you travel to the facility, this is some of the worst writing I've ever seen. Basically, one of the low-level soldiers there has an implant in his brain, and he pretends that this lets him speak to the mantisaur. Now, of course, you, the player, probably already suspect that it doesn't actually work. But in the very first conversation, there's this ginger scientist bitch constantly shouting in your ear,
I just wanted to make it clear to our newcomer that you are full of shit. You've always been full of shit, and you will always be full of shit. Just ignore him. He was clever enough to pretend that Graft lets him talk with the beast. So overnight, he upstarted from simple trooper to de facto commander of this installation. Listen to me. The man is a charlatan, a fraud. And if you give him the specimen, it will be forever lost to his ignorance.
Do you think I'm a fucking idiot? Of course I knew that it was fake from the fucking beginning. They don't even pretend. They don't even give the dude dialogue lines that sound convincing. I mean, what is even the joke here? You understand that part of humor is the unexpected, right? If anything, it would be 10 times funnier if it turned out actually Eventually, the implant does let him speak to the mantis, and then the mantis tears her fucking head off after she talks shit about it one too many times. But to get to the point, your quest here is to go fetch a mutated mantisaur egg, and you can either give it to the dude or give it to the scientist. And the dude wants to breed it with the mantisaur to make an ubermensch, like, super mantisaur race, which sounds pretty cool. But of course, the ginger bitch is like, no, the thing's just gonna eat it. And so our alternative option is to give it to her in the name of science. And of course, this is a fucking Reddit game, so, you know, science good. Whatever the man wants is bad. So we fight our way through a huge nest of mantisaurs to get an egg, which is just a massive waste of time and ammo, and you don't really get any cool loot out of it. You hand over the egg to whoever you want. Obviously, I hand it over to the dude, because fuck this bitch. God damn. And of course, just like the woman said, the mantisaur just eats the egg, and then an army of mantisaurs and caterpillars show up, and you gotta shoot them, and the quest just ends unceremoniously. That's it. The woman was right, the man was wrong. What a lesson to take away from this game. God, these people are so insufferable. It's unreal, man. Sorry, I just had to go off on a tangent because that part genuinely pissed me off. Most of this game was exactly what I expected, but this quest was obviously crossing a line. This was just some woman on the writing team who wanted to complain about the men in her life. Oh, she's always right and the man is always wrong. No, I could make more money. If I was in charge of Tesla, I'd make $10 quadrillion and Elon Musk is a dummy. Anyway, back to the main quest. So we have to fight our way through this huge monastery. Of course, there's a side quest here too that everyone watching the stream knows what I'm about to bring up. There's a side quest you can discover here where there are two diverse women discussing whether or not war is good or bad. I'm not joking. This is a real quest in this game. And so you need to go to the library and fetch them some books while everyone in the monastery has been killed or evacuated. And of course, these two chicks need you to go do some dirty work for them. So you go, you grab the books, you come back, and at the end of the quest, they just agree with each other's position. I'm not even joking. This is so cringe. The one that supported war sees the value in peace, and the one who loved peace saw the value in war. How poetic. And of course, your player character is given the cringiest, most nihilistic line ever. God. Oh no. Oh no. No, here it comes. It was worth it. It was worth it. The speech check is nihilism.
But have you also considered that existence is a curse and consciousness a prison?
And no, there is no way to kill these chicks. This is an Unreal Engine 5 game, so you can't even use console commands without a mod. Future synth here, as it turns out there actually is a way to kill these characters. As I was kindly informed, Marisol's side quest actually leads to the death of one of these characters and the potential death of the other. So yes, I'm about to go on yet another tangent. I promise this will be one of the last ones of the video though. So the Indian grandma assassin is contacted by one of her former colleagues from over 20 years ago because her genius research could lead to the destruction of the entire universe. And yes, these two are both lesbians and were formerly in love, of course. They're just hitting every single left-wing stereotype they possibly could with this game. So yet another genius girl boss bitch who tells you what to do. I'm just gonna spare you a lot of time. We do her dirty work, which involves burning all records of the research to the ground. Unfortunately, someone already requested a copy, and so this requires us to fly back to the monastery on Dorado. It's there that we discover that the younger brown researcher, the one who hated war, has gotten her head caved into paste. And we quickly find out the older one's location is in a special research facility on Paradise Island. So we head there and find out that the girl boss super genius is already there waiting for us, asking why we took so long. I think I've already complained about characters being condescending to you 3 or 4 times this video, but woo, I'm so tempted to say something again, but I'm gonna hold it in. In any case, she's here to pretend to assist in her own research, where in actuality, she has us sabotage the experiment so that the Order will never try to recreate it again. As for what the experiment actually is, it's generating some kind of pocket universe or something that I suppose would lead to the destabilization of the actual universe or something to that effect. I don't know. I was only half paying attention. And of course, the person in charge of this whole experiment is the older woman who loved war. and our grandma assassin implies that she killed the younger one. Yeah, just straight up crushed her head. Again, I can't tell if this is supposed to be humor or not. An 80-year-old woman crushed her colleague's head like a watermelon, I guess to get access to this research first. This is what I'm saying. This shit is so inhuman, it's unreal. You can't say it was AI generated, and AI would not be this stupid. Only female writers would be, let's be honest. And look, I know everyone watching this is wondering, why did I not point out Marisol's goofy-ass goggles that are looking in 2 different directions? Well, because the devs obviously designed them that way on purpose to look stupid because they want reviewers to point it out. They think this is funny and it looks dumb on purpose. So after we sabotage the experiment, we have an option to either talk this old lady into abandoning the experiment completely, or failing that, sabotage the vents in her room to generate a lethal atmosphere from the failed experiment. So even though I just started this whole tangent to correct a factual error I made in the original recording, which is that I thought there were some unkillable NPCs, as far as I'm aware, there should be a way to kill almost everybody, if not literally everyone. I think it was interesting to bring up this quest is yet another example of a bunch of old female geniuses. Are these all supposed to be self-inserts of the aging millennial writers coping with the fact that they're disgusting cat ladies constantly reeking of piss and hating every man they come across? I mean, maybe that's just me reading into it a little bit too much, you know. Maybe my lack of media literacy is showing again. This dialogue feels like if they trained an AI on Twitter discourse. It is genuinely infuriating. I can't see any single human being enjoying how the NPCs treat you, which is why I think whichever gameplay designer ensured that you'd be able to kill everyone is the only person whose hand I would shake on the dev team. Everyone else is going straight in the incinerator. As for the conclusion of the quest, even though I killed the old lady, Marisol and her former lover resolved their differences, and I got to kill basically everyone here, so I guess it's a win-win situation for everyone. Alright, back to the story. Now, once you fought most of the way through the monastery, suddenly, De Vries' ally stops you with a moral quandary. He's tied up a bunch of his fellow order members in a room and has a hydraulic press about to crush them all. And so, like a Saturday morning cartoon villain, he's like, well, hero, will you run past them to get to me before I can send all this info to De Vries, or will you save the civilians? Well, there is no karma system in this game, and I don't even think you lose any faction reputation either for letting them die, so you might as well just skip them. Not that skipping them does anything significant anyway, all it does is make the boss fight a little easier and the next mission a little easier as well. And if you invested in speech like I did, you could just skip the boss battle anyway, so this is just a completely pointless padding part of the game. So we learned from this whole conflict that De Vries is heading to a peace talks between the Order of the Ascendant and Auntie's Choice to kill the delegates for both sides. The question is, why? Well, for the big main quest of the halfway point in the game, you have to fight your way through this ship, which with my new heavy machine gun from the dogshit war debate quest, I was easily able to dispatch of any of the enemies here. We finally confront Augustine de Vries, and this conversation is incredibly railroaded. Just like I'm sure everyone predicted, she turns out to be right about everything. The skip drive technology is causing the rifts, as was actually already explained to us at the beginning of the game, and so all of her actions have been taken to both stop the Protectorate from further researching the rifts, and by extension, stopping Auntie's Choice from getting access to the technology so that mankind doesn't wage war with the rifts and destroy the entire galaxy. Now, I still don't entirely understand the logic of how continuing the war between the Order of the Ascendant and Auntie's Choice would lead to the Order solving the problem with the rifts. Again, the writing here kind of just like tanks off a fucking cliff, and she just sounds like a crazy person. But at least we learned something useful out of this conversation, that somehow the incredibly incompetent Protectorate has some genius researchers on their homeworld Praetor and have discovered a way to close the rifts with a rift modulator device. If you take Niles with you on this quest, he actually has a lot of base dialogue. He wants to kill De Vries no matter what. And being the chud that I am, of course I agree, and we get an incredibly anticlimactic boss fight. Take her head off!
This is for Wade, for Eric and Helen, and for everyone else's futures you tried to burn.
Do what you must. Proceeding to assembly about time. Good riddance.
Oh, that was it. Now, of course, immediately afterward, the rift starts destabilizing and creates a huge explosion. You have to escape the station. And after we make it out, the Chief of Special Operations tells us that we are allowed to do whatever we want as long as we accomplish the mission. Now, how is this different from our orders before 10 years ago? I have no idea. I was already doing exactly what I wanted before this. And this is where the quality of the game starts to tank. The last 2 planets are definitely unfinished. You would think that the Protectorate homeworld would have, I don't know, a city of some kind, maybe even a town. But no, it's like a giant purple wasteland with just a few military installations, and you get to visit the mental refreshment insane asylum, I guess. I don't know what else to call it, the brainwashing facility, but I'm getting a little ahead of myself. This is where we get to complete Niall's companion quest. I actually skipped the first part, which took place on Paradise Island, where we meet his good buddy YongYea. Yes, this Zebulon Tran character is actually voiced by YongYea.
YongYea.
And, well, you've heard his Kiryu. His Zebulon is not much better.
Intruders, then. I suppose you intend to extract my surrender through means most lurid and foul.
Damn, the head curator. I had hoped to slip in before his shift.
YongYea's voice acting is so fucking bad. Holy shit.
He must be dispatched quickly.
Can we please stop putting E-celebs in video games? Half the fucking voice actors in that dispatch game are YouTubers. Yeah, this shit is just getting embarrassing. Well, in any case, the second part of the quest is the only one that matters. See, Zebulon Tran is a communist developer self-insert character, and his goal here is to break into the tomb of the matriarch, which for some reason has been transformed into a museum. And the Protectorate, in their eternal wisdom, has decided to store the schematics for skip drives in a hidden room inside of a museum. Now, believe it or not, the end of this quest is kind of unintentionally based. As you fight your way through the museum security, you eventually find the secret room where Zebulon discovers that the Protectorate was built on a lie.
The skip drive schematics are here. How the explosive safeguards against tampering work. Its evolution over time. But no original concepts, no sketches. Nothing. Our dear matriarch is a fraud. A cheat. She did not invent the skip drive.
It's been redeemed, guys. I knew women couldn't invent anything. I was right. I have to admit, I was genuinely surprised by this twist. Given all the other far leftist BS in this game, I really thought they expected us to just believe that the founder of an empire is not only a woman, but also a genius inventor at that. It wouldn't be out of place with the writing of the rest of this game. But the broader point is that the Protectorate is all built on a lie. Now, I don't even know if it's ever explained where the skip drive was actually invented. I even confronted the final boss on this factoid and he didn't explain it, so maybe I just missed it, but who gives a fuck, really? But Zebulon does in fact find the schematics for the skip drive, and he wants to release it to the public so that everyone can build a warp drive or something. And Niles actually has some common sense and says that all hell is gonna break loose if anyone can build a warp drive, which, knowing that they caused the rifts, that's obviously the case. So believe it or not, the correct choice here is actually to convince the communists to not release the valuable information to the proletariat. Then, at the end, they just straight up imply that they're gay for each other. Yeah, it's hard to tell if they're just meant to be friends or not. You never know with female writers. And for some baffling reason, there's also a hidden passageway that leads from the museum to Central Command, which is like a major government building / military base. And you end up killing like 100 fucking Protectorate guys here. I want to remind you that Tristan's been with me the whole time, you know. You know what? I don't even know why I'm pretending to care at this point. It's clear the developers didn't. I guess if the Protectorate was a faction, then an entire planet would be non-hostile, or at least you would think. As it turns out, despite this being the Protectorate homeworld, there are Auntie's choice troops like less than a mile outside of their command center. Yeah, they've already lost this war, dude. And actually, I think that's part of the point the story's trying to get across, with all the subtlety of a sledgehammer. And it's here that you can complete a major part of Tristan's side quest. And here you discover that the Supreme Supreme Arbiter was actually planning on betraying the Protectorate. Now, Tristan, of course, is in complete denial of this. He can't possibly imagine how the perfect symbol of justice in his mind could betray his nation. And you also get this really fucking strange exchange where a junior Arbiter shows up who's a woman, and I don't know if they were trying to set up a romance between these two because the writing is so fucking awkward here. But she decided to pursue him of her own free will to accuse him of going AWOL when, according to Tristan, Arbiters are allowed to leave and investigate things of their own will, so he didn't even break any fucking rules. And yet this bitch has a giant stick up her ass for no reason, and I decided to talk her down. I don't know why, I should have just shot her in the face, I guess. But of course, the point of this is to bend Tristan's morality a little bit to get him to bend the rules. But again, this character development is handled so poorly because she just comes out of nowhere and then never shows up again. And since I'm already talking about it, I might as well talk about the end of the quest as well. As it turns out, Tristan's best buddy, Virgil, overheard the Supreme Arbiter's conversation and her plan to betray the Protectorate, and so he just straight up terminated her. And so, of course, you can choose to let Tristan kill him or convince him that everyone's just following their own system of justice. And yeah, that's pretty much the end of the quest. I don't know, this is lame as fuck. Only Outer Worlds could somehow manage to make Judge Dredd boring and gay. But back to Praetor. So you fight your way through the Protectorate facility that houses the Rift Modulator. You can side with another girl boss scientist who has an incompetent male boss who just straight up shoots her in the face right before the boss fight. I thought that was kind of funny. You grab the Rift Modulator, which can close these rifts, and you make your way out of the facility. Now that's all you actually have to do on this planet. You can just leave here and head to the last one. But for the hell of it, I decided to explore a little bit, and this is when I discovered the Mental Refreshment Center. One of the plot twists as you enter the Rift Modulator facility is that the console has overthrown the Sovereign. I want to point out that the player never has a conversation with the leader of the evil faction at any point, and the only time we ever see him speak is during the tutorial mission, and then he's just overthrown off screen. However, there's a little hint in this video message that he's been sent off for mental refreshment, the brainwashing, right? And so, when I discovered that I'd found the mental refreshment facility, I'm like, hey, maybe the Sovereign is down here. And it turns out I was right. This is a completely optional dungeon, and honestly, it's kind of cool. You get to see how they brainwash all of the citizens. And as you try to escape the facility, you can even choose to rescue a guy for a quest, but I accidentally made him hostile by killing all of the innocent people here, and I didn't feel like waiting 3 days to reset his hostility. And no, there is no wait function in this game like there is in Bethesda games, so I would have to pass time doing something else. You can also debate head torturer slash brainwasher guy, and as you can imagine, the dialogue there is pretty cringy as well. But the real reason to explore here is that you can actually find the Sovereign in the basement level. And I gotta say, this was hugely disappointing. There's no quest involved with him as far as I can tell, and although Tristan does have a few lines of dialogue, being absolutely horrified that his glorious leader has been reduced to an invalid, there's just not really anything you could do here except, I guess, shoot and kill the Sovereign if you really wanted to, but it's not like the game actually gives you a reason. But I do have to give the game credit for having one optional dungeon that was actually interesting. And that's it for the third planet, Praetor. What an absolute waste of potential. You would think, given an opportunity to explore the villain's homeworld, that you could maybe interact with the settlement, see some of the brainwashed citizens in action, maybe even help them with a communist uprising. I can't believe the developers resisted a chance to have a quest like that. But no, like I said, this game has no ambition whatsoever. It's just another series of dungeons in an empty purple wasteland. Now, before we move on to the final planet, we do have an option here to solicit help from Auntie's Choice. We can fly to Auntie's HQ, a massive ship called the Undisputed Claim. And this is where I was making the point earlier about none of these advertisements being effective. I mean, just look at this fucking place. It looks like a vomit. There's so much visual diarrhea everywhere. And yes, while there certainly are some quests here, this is about the point in the game where I stopped giving a fuck anymore. I had no intention of siding with Auntie, so why the hell would I do these quests? All I wanted to do was shoot her in the face, and unfortunately, the only way you get an opportunity to do that is either to do her quest line or to do the Order of the Ascendant's quest line. So, I actually don't really have much to say here. I was deeply disappointed that I couldn't just, I don't know, shoot everyone here, loot a key card, and then head up to her office and blast her face. You know, kind of like you can do with Caesar in Fallout New Vegas. No, unfortunately, it has to be tied to a quest. While I did explore the ship a bit, the only interesting location I discovered is a high-class bar that has, well, let's say this rivals the disgusting, quote-unquote, dancers from Starfield, with instead these just being gay prostitute uniforms. They don't even look right on the women, like they're clearly designed to be worn by men. Actually, judging by these women's skeletal structures, they're probably men too, let's be honest. Now moving on to the final planet, Cloister. Instead of a tropical island, a desert, a purple wasteland, instead this time we have a frozen tundra, so a snow wasteland. Like I said, I was getting kind of tired of the game at this point, so I wasn't bothering with any side quests. This is where we find the home base of the Order of the Ascendant. One of the first NPCs you talk to in their settlement is Black Einstein, or maybe Black Karl Marx. I don't even know what the fuck they were thinking with this character design. This just looks absurd. And to talk to their faction leader, we have to do some chores for the local black woman in charge. I swear they just copy-pasted the same exact fucking character that was working for Auntie's choice in the first planet. And no, I don't mean her face before all the people start crying racism. I mean her actual characterization is exactly the same.
Best that you're talking to me now instead of mid-work. I do seem to have a slight propensity for stabbing randomly with my tools when interrupted. But I suppose...
Excuse me?
Spinning in the statements column. Speak away.
Do you think you can just talk to me that way, you fucking bitch? So yes, this bitch is sassy and condescending and makes you do work for her, which just involves clearing out a fucking glorified bandit camp. Yeah, you gotta kill some cultists. So we go do a chore, and we finally get to meet the head of the Order of the Ascendant, and, well, you know, I already spoiled it earlier in the video. It's another fucking hag. Yes, another elderly white woman is the head of a fucking faction in this game. 2 out of 3, dude. And if we're counting deceased leaders that characters worship, the matriarch qualifies too, so that's 3 for 3. And again, do I really have to point out the absurdity that the faction that is known for facts and logic and mathematics and science is led by a woman? This chud right here doesn't have a misogynistic bone in his body, but women didn't even invent the dishwasher. Google had to lie to make it look like they'd made something. So anyway, the big faction quest here is we've got to get a supercomputer running that can decipher the Rift Modulator data that we acquired on Praetor. This quest was probably the most blatant example of padding in the entire game. We had to fight our way through a 2-hour-long dungeon where you shoot what feels like hundreds of enemies, and it's the same enemy types we've been fighting the whole game. Obsidian even tried to pad out this quest further by making you liberate a settlement in front of the dungeon. I said, fuck it, we can fight our way through by ourselves, and we did, no problem. Because by this point in the game, you should be overpowered as hell. I was min-max for damage. I was 2 or 3 shotting almost every enemy. And yet it still took me 2 hours, because that's just how many enemies they throw at you. Well, eventually, you're able to repair the supercomputer. You can choose which personality type you'd like to give it, which is yet more evidence that the Sovereign originally was a faction you could side with, because yes, one of the personalities is a Sovereign-based personality. I suppose the logic here is that the Order of the Ascendant will follow anything this computer tells them to do, the almighty algorithm, and so if you pick the Sovereign personality type, it'll eventually turn them into another, like, fascist government of some sort. Regardless, I picked it just for fun. Now, normally, this is the point of no return in the game. You can head right to the end after this, because the computer has deciphered the rift data and given you the ability to close the massive rift. Now, of course, after all of the pain and misery this game had put me through, I wasn't quite done with it yet. No, I was gonna find a way to wipe out every fucking faction, because they're gonna get what they fucking deserve for making me suffer for 30 hours up until this point. Unfortunately, because there was almost no data on the game when I was playing through it, because it hadn't technically officially released, this was still the early access, I didn't know that the only way to kill Auntie Cleo was by siding with the Order of the Ascendant, so I ended up wasting a whole lot of time. But eventually, I wasted even more time doing more fetch quests that were basically meaningless. They just add up to a couple extra ending slides. And I finally gunned down everyone on Auntie Cleo's ship. We make our way to her office, and as it turns out, she got decapitated. She's just a head in a jar, which is another not so subtle Futurama reference. And of course, they turn this into a joke too. And this game finds yet another way to deeply disappoint me, because if you do a speech check to get paid a bunch of money to spare her, it doesn't give you any option to kill her afterward. You can't just shoot her jar and kill her that way. No, you have to flip a specific switch that for some reason is disabled if you take her money. And even when you do kill her, the animation is, I don't know, not really that satisfying, kind of lazy. Well, in any case, with Auntie Cleo taken care of, there was only one faction left. And so I head back to Cloister and just fucking blast this old hag in the face about 50 times. Yes, of course, the 60-year-old woman with an exposed head takes dozens of headshots to kill. Nothing to see here, guys. Good RPG mechanics at work. And after gunning down everyone here, I wasn't done yet. No, I went back to Dorado and took care of the refugee camp too. I mean, why not? I'm not convinced. I'm not fucking convinced. You're not, people. You're not. I'm not gonna be fooled. I'm not fucking fooled. None of you. Not one. This is a fake ass world. I want out of the Matrix now. Let me out. Fucking let me out. I can't take it anymore. You're not gonna fucking brainwash me. I'm not gonna have it. I just got an achievement for collecting human hearts. That would require them to be human. They're not. None of you are fucking human. And that was probably the most fun I had during this entire game, was just genociding NPCs. Would you believe that what I just did in this video is going to be against YouTube's terms of service starting November 17th? Yeah, this platform sucks that much dick. Unbelievable. Anyway, it's time to head off to Horizon Point and save the galaxy. The final mission just involves you fighting your way through hundreds of goons. You say hello to an old friend, Helen, who I hadn't even mentioned in this video because she's so insignificant to the story, but I guess on the off chance you did remember talking to her in the first mission, you get to put her out of her misery here, as she's brought back as like a cosmic zombie of sorts. Given how the rifts distort reality and make shit float and bring stuff back to life and all this crap, it reminded me a lot of the Starfield Shattered Space DLC, which honestly I had forgotten I even played until someone on stream reminded me. But yeah, this conclusion is incredibly similar. Of all the things you could rip off, you fucking rip off Starfield. In any case, you end up completing the experiment that the Protectorate was researching before. It turns out the Sovereign was actually a good guy, and he was trying to fix the rift problem before the console fried his brain and killed his whole family. Yeah, that was a little plot point I forgot to mention. Now, the real question is, why would the console wait 10 years after he killed the Sovereign's family to seize power? Whatever, who cares? We gotta finish this video. We end up fighting a super mech as a mini boss, which appropriately is a bullet sponge. I don't have much to complain about. The real issue is the final boss, the console. He gives his whole epic villain speech. He's just an irredeemable, comical, evil motherfucker with no real human motivations or complex character. He just wants to be the emperor of the galaxy or something. I don't know, man. They did not care, dude. Not even slightly. Also, something you're gonna notice, once again, the developers not even trying to hide their heavy inspiration from other media. The console just looks like Omni-Man, dude. I just want to remind you, there's still people to this day who want Obsidian to make a New Vegas 2, when they can't even be fucking bothered to represent an evil faction with any redeemable attributes in their own IP. And so we have our final boss battle. I decided not to use my 20 speech to just talk him out of it, because that's boring and always poorly written. And I was immediately punished by being given one of the worst bullet sponges I've ever faced in any video game. This motherfucker took like 100 shots to the head. And remember, I've been melting everything else. All of his minions die in 2 shots. But him? Nah, he takes 100. And he guns down both my companions within like 5 seconds. On the second try, I just spam my companion abilities to stun him, fill him with lead, and eventually I'm just barely victorious. And as one final fuck you from Obsidian, you will not believe what they copied this ending from. They copied Fallout 3's ending. You know, the one everyone complained about at release? Yeah, they did this in 2 different ways. One, in having the main villain be a guy that you barely interacted with before the end. For Fallout 3, that was Colonel Autumn, who you had like 1 conversation with before the end of the game, and this one being the Consul, who you never speak to directly before the end. You just watch him on a video screen. They're even both the same character archetype, the evil general, who doesn't even wear power armor. But I have to give Fallout 3 the advantage on this one, because at least Colonel Autumn dies in like 3 combat shotgun shots, whereas the Consul probably has 10 times as much health. And the second way, probably the more important way, is that the player is heavily encouraged to sacrifice themselves to save everyone. Now, I will add one caveat to that. You don't have to sacrifice yourself. You can convince one of your companions to do it for you. But I just find it very funny. It's basically the exact same scenario, though. Instead of you having to enter the chamber and inputting a code and then getting killed by radiation, someone has to fly the ship into the rift to destabilize it and then close it. So, of course, I convinced my trusty melanated companion Niles to make one last sacrifice for the greater good. And it took me, I think, 18 speech to get him to do it, which is fucking unbelievable. I can imagine in his head it went something like, "Shit, white boy, I ain't sacrificing myself at these crackers." Well, with the power of my boundless psychopathic charisma, I managed to easily convince him to die for the sake of the Arcadia system. What's left of its citizens, anyway. I mean, I've gunned down most of the population. Ba 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 bum. Ba 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 ba. Whatever. He's dead. And yeah, the ending slides are about as disappointing as you would expect. The game didn't really account for me killing everybody, so believe it or not, the Order of the Ascendant was just fine in the ending. The game does acknowledge their leader being killed, but because I helped them fix the supercomputer, it led the people who were left into a new age of prosperity or something. Perhaps even more shocking, the Protectorate survived this entire thing too, despite them losing on every front, all of their major faction leaders being dead or functionally dead in the case of the Sovereign himself. I can only imagine that in our mind's eye, we're supposed to picture millions of citizens that are doing just fine without their overlords telling them what to do. But that's not how any fucking Soviet state works. Hell, that's not how any system of government works. I don't think there's a single country on the planet Earth that would survive their entire government being wiped out. There'd be mass chaos, there'd be starvation, there'd be riots. There'd be burning, looting, murdering. I can't even believe they're just glossing over the fact the entire game has set up the collapse of the Protectorate. And then the ending slides, they're just like, they made it out okay, I guess. Luckily, killing Auntie Cleo actually does screw over Auntie's choice, and it's implied that some other mega corporation performs a hostile takeover in the future. And yeah, the game just ends there. There's no post-game, there's not really any true satisfying conclusion. Since I only completed 2 of the companion quests, I didn't really get many ending slides related to them either. Man, I'm so glad I wasted 35 hours of my life playing this game. Was it worth making like a 2-hour-long video or however long this is going to end up being at the end? Probably not. But like I said in the beginning, someone had to cover this game in detail because you just know years down the line, people are going to pretend this is some kind of hidden gem. It's not. This is a giant pile of shit. There is not a single redeeming quality about this game. The best thing about it is the shooting, and it is just okay. You can tell there's certain elements of the gameplay that the devs did put some effort into. Like, this game on paper has a shocking amount of replay value, at least with the skill system. but why would you ever want to play this terrible game again? Even with the Stockholm Syndrome setting in past the 20-hour mark, this game was still torture. It just was slightly less painful once I accepted my fate. I can't even really say this game is true political propaganda. I mean, it might be on some level, but it's not effective. There's not a single person that is going to be swayed by the developer's ideology here. No, this game reeks of the writers huffing their own farts. That's all it is. Of Redditors sucking themselves off about how high and mighty and correct they are, and they're the moral arbiters, and their enemies are comically evil and incompetent. It's garbage. This fucking IP is garbage. There is no way that the Outer Worlds franchise survives this game. God willing, Obsidian won't survive it either, but for some reason, Microsoft really likes keeping them around. I think everyone who watches this channel needs to understand that video games declining is a systemic issue that is not just caused by political propaganda, even if the political ideologues, the Redditors, the DEI hires, the ESG money, if all of that was removed from the equation, modern video games would still be worse than games that released 20 years ago. Because these modern game devs are genuinely untalented. This is not just corporate meddling, forcing them to put certain features in the game, to squeeze a certain amount of money out of the player, anything like that. These people have no fucking talent, period. I am tired of leftists constantly defending the cooks in the kitchen. If you hire a chef for your restaurant who doesn't know how to fucking scramble eggs, of course he's gonna produce inedible slop. The good news is this game bombed horribly, so it serves as yet more evidence that outwardly ugly games do not sell. There's a reason why Concord was the biggest bomb of all time. This disgusting DEI aesthetic needs to die permanently. It is incredibly Space Toucan-like in nature, if you know what I mean. In any case, this is not something any real human beings enjoy looking at. So hopefully this is the last we see of the Outer Worlds franchise. I don't really have much else to say here in the conclusion. I think I covered the game pretty thoroughly. There's no reason anyone should want to try this game after watching this video. And for everyone else who didn't watch the video and just dislike bombed it, thanks for the engagement, Gaming Circle Jerk. You're helping keep this channel alive. That's about it. See you next time, guys. Do the devs have no self-awareness? They not understand I got the power N-Rage from a black woman? N-Rage. Synth, you're just reading into it. They mean in it's a pun, like enrage. No. What does N stand for? They still haven't explained it. Like N-Ray. Everyone in chat is my N-Ray. You know what I'm saying? Shit. And now I just got N-Rage. Racism